Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome to Kunsthal and welcome to everyone who's joining us online. My name is Jill Phillips and tonight I'm hosting How to Run an Inclusive Nightclub. Um, a safe space is a very complicated issue because you cannot ever have a completely safe space. You can only have safer spaces. And it's a hard thing to get right, but when you do, it's a really beautiful experience. And it is a given that marginalized groups need these safer spaces, but it's really hard to balance, to balance all the things required to create an environment that is free from racism and homophobia and transphobia. So today we want to talk about what challenges we face when trying to create a more inclusive club experience. And to talk about this today, I'm thrilled to announce the following speakers. The first one is Casper Burghout. Say hello, Casper. You see us? Hi. Casper is part of. Hi. Casper is part of the Berlin-based collective Pornceptual, and Pornceptual is known for their diverse and inclusive nights. Next, we have Nadine. Hello. Hi. And they are part of the London club collective Pussy Palace, and Pussy Palace aims to be a space where queer women, trans and non-binary and intersex people of color can party while feeling safe. And here we have Bergsoen. She is part of Cloud Collective and an initiator of the Cloud Club Nights. And oh, we've got fans in the audience. And last but not least, we have Marika, and she's the mother and the creator of Milkshake Festival, Mini Milkshake, and For All Who Love Foundation. So give them a warm round of applause. Thanks for coming. Now, I want to first start off by asking Casper, because Pornceptual has been lauded by many for being a sex party that is very non-threatening and very accessible for first-timers. And Casper, what do you think has contributed to people feeling this safe at your parties?
First off, thanks for inviting me to us and Conceptual to this panel. Such an important topic that we're speaking about, and also the topics that you're covering in this entire week. And I definitely think there is truth in what you say. We're often also seen as a party that is quite accessible to newcomers. And I think it is difficult to pinpoint one thing that makes us maybe a little bit more accessible to others. But I think it comes back to quite a few things. To mention one, I think we have, of course, we have a strict door policy in mind, but we're open to really host a variety of people, from straight to gay. I think that range is very beautiful. But it's hard to say one particular thing that really caused us to be so open. And I think it really has been a trajectory over years. We have been hosting events in Berlin for over 8 years. So we did not start it like this. We started very small in a small basement with 100 people. And to get where we are now is 8 years further down the road. So it's not necessarily a starting point where we are at now, indeed, as you said, but more of really a trajectory of multiple venues, dozens of parties, and I feel it is for us also important to have a space where people feel more welcome, and I think it's really important. Like, for example, if I can reference Cloud Collective now, the spaces, the safer spaces that you create, but we also see an initiative there for really on a larger platform and really drive change on a larger platform. I will come back to some of the points I make later on maybe some of the initiatives on what exactly made these things safe, but I want to leave it here for now.
Okay, and what I'm curious about is that you say that 8 years ago it didn't start out of this way, like as a safe place, but it kind of became that way. Was it at what point of Perceptual did you decide that you wanted to really go out of your way to make it a safe space? Because it doesn't sound like it was that way from the beginning.
I mean, it was. I think our very first event 8 years ago wasn't meant as, okay, this is going to be a 2-monthly thing that we're organizing, but we kind of really saw the beauty of having a space all together with a smaller community, because at the first event, it was such a small community, it was friends and kind of like everyone in the venue knew each other. We were like, wow, this is really, really special that we wanted to build further upon. But we also realized, especially with being a sex positive party where we're facilitating a dark room, we need to have a set of additional kind of like ground rules in place in order to create a space where people feel safe to enact and also to dress up or to wear something they would not wear to any club. So we very soon, I think already in the beginning, realized that we needed to have that. And it was important for us to really start small, because we needed to understand ourselves as well, everything kind of like that comes with organizing a party. And I think it's impossible to go from 0 to 2,000 people straight away. You need to do that in little levels and bringing your community with you in every step. So the people who have been with us sometimes from the very beginning are still with us and are such an important part of who we are as a collective and the parties that we host, and kind of really bringing out that shared responsibility of having that safer dance floor that we all need to have.
Okay. Well, thank you, because what I hear you say is that it is a process, and it needs to be a process if you want to make it as safe as possible. Well, thank you. And Nadine, I read an article, and it said one of the founders of Pussy Palace said that there's no reason the dance floor cannot be educational. If it wasn't you who said it, do you agree? And how do you think Pussy Palace educates its crowd?
It was me that said that.
Oh, good.
And the reason that I said that is because, like, the dance floor was my education. Like, I didn't finish school or go to university, and like I've always, in every aspect of the club, I've worked, from the glass collector to working the door to cleaning the toilets even. So yeah, like and it taught me like so much, like different types of people, different ways that people work, I guess, like especially with like drug and alcohol abuse, how to move through the club with when these are like your daily experiences like at work. And because it taught me a lot, I feel like, especially for like queer people, especially for queer and trans people of color, like it tends to be one of the only places that we feel like seen in, unfortunately. And therefore it can be educational because you find your friend group, you find places to work, you find and you learn from these people, you learn about your identity, you learn about how to get into relationships, like how to move through these spaces, and then you apply that to like how you move or aim to move in the rest of the world, because you can't actually do really as you do in a club for queer and trans people of color as much as you do in the outside world. So yeah, like and that's why, like, when a lot of people said, you know, as we pushed through like the Pussy Palace like policies and intentional spaces, and people were always like really surprised that why were we doing that, why were we trying to make the club an educational space. But it's something that's happened within like queer, trans, sex positive communities for as long as the club has been open, is to try and push through like I mean, if it wasn't for nightclubs, we wouldn't have a lot of like political messaging that we do today. Like a lot of working class like communities like use the club as a way to spread across like information about AIDS, for example, information about political parties. Like it's something that's always existed. So I'm just really part of like a long line of legacy that came before me. And yeah, I think that that's always a way. It's where people gather, it's where people have fun, it's where you can actually ingest a lot. Like one picture or the way that someone decides to treat you in that club can like affect like the rest of your life. It certainly affected me and many people that come to Pussy Palace. So
Yeah, I do like, thank you, because I like the point of, for the queer community, the dance floor being more than just a dance floor. It's a place where you learn about yourself and others and feel safe, and it has a very important role. So I love that quote. The dance floor can absolutely be educational. Thank you. And yeah, Bergson, Klau's a relatively new initiative. What inspired you to create a safe space, and how did you experience implementing it for the first time?
Well, what inspired us personally was that there was nothing else in this city. Like Amsterdam is such a big gay city, that like a queer city that has so many parties and different things you can go to, and I felt like every time we wanted to go somewhere, we had to take the train to Amsterdam, and I just wanted to party for once and then take the bike home, you know, like. What actually inspired us was there was one party, and it was called the Gender Bending Queer Party, and a lot of people here probably know about that. And when they quit, that was a big inspiration for us, because when that didn't go through, like nothing else happened. So we decided to take matter into our own hands, and yeah, it felt really empowering. It felt really, because we've been so frustrated with street harassment and feeling unsafe wherever we go, especially in the nightlife. So for us, it felt really empowering to like take control over that little part where we had our party.
Yeah, so you were inspired by the Gender Bending Queer Party to create a safe space for yourself, because there wasn't any in Rotterdam.
Exactly.
Nice. And Marieke, well, Milkshake Festival is a favorite amongst people from all walks of life because of the welcoming nature of the festival. Is it harder to create a safer environment with a less specific door policy?
Totally. 34,000 people is not that, you cannot guarantee any safe, because this is, for any individual can decide, of course, and every year it's again hard work to create it more safe. I think Milkshake, the atmosphere is feels safe for most of people, but this starts all with the tone of voice, with your artwork, with all your socials, what you do. So we do most of the things, of course, from the heart. And I think that creates the most of the atmosphere. And also, I mean, I deal with stage hosts of organizations who is so mean backstage. Also, I don't work with people who are negative, because I cannot, because this is the heart and the core of an event. For actually last year, this year, which didn't happen, I built this whole Queer Watch building, just as a stopover before you go to a security guard, because you never know. I don't cost the security people, and sometimes people can't handle what they see at Milkshake. Just to have a stopover for people to feel a little bit more safe, but also for a little bit more info about drugs or something like that. So try to. It's very hard.
Yeah, I can imagine, because with so many people. But I think you make an interesting point that the whole, the best way to convey the safety is already in the marketing and the communication that you do and stuff.
This is
because
how
I think that's something
step in.
A lot of people overlook, but it plays a big role in the kind of audience you attract, right? The way you communicate and the images you use.
Yeah, I have, for all years, we have this welcome committee at very high chairs in the beginning, where you enter the venue, who only give compliments and how nice you're there. Because I think that also that changes your mind, even what happened before. It changes your mind and your atmosphere a little bit to go further. And so this is small things, but we do a lot of small things.
Yeah, and it's usually those tiny things that make the biggest difference, right?
Hopefully.
Yeah. And this is a question for all of you, and I would like to hear your input on all of your input. What would you say is the biggest challenge when it comes to creating an inclusive yet safe door policy? Because I think the kind of downfall is that you start excluding people on aspects of them.
I think this is more for the clubby people, not for the festivals, because I cannot
do that. Totally, yeah, you can't exclude people there.
Yeah, so what's really difficult about that is we don't want to judge someone based on their appearance, so we don't want to assume their gender or their heritage or whatever. That's not something we like consider, but it's more about their behavior. Are they letting us speak? Are they letting us explain the guidelines? How are they reacting? Are they aware of where they are and what a queer party is? And if that's all okay, like you can go ahead. But if we all took a workshop from Sex Matters and also our volunteers. So everyone at the door is aware of like the things to look out for and the things, that could be the people that could be, what do you call it, a risk.
Yeah. So it's a very involved policy. You can't
Yeah.
just be like, in other clubs it's like no sneakers or whatever. It's like you have to be so involved and make sure that everyone that enters the party knows where they are, right? And Caspar, I saw you nodding your head. What would you say is the biggest challenge for you?
I mean, it is incredibly difficult, and I mean, I've done the door a couple of times in the very beginning of Conceptual, and soon also found out it's not my place to be, because it is just a really difficult position to be at, and you're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna let people in who don't treat the space and the people inside in the way they should. You're gonna make mistakes about people who will fit beautifully inside and have the night of their life, and you're not letting them in, and that is quite hard to live with sometimes. Especially, we've had queues up to 3 hours before the pandemic. We don't have time to have 5-minute conversations with everyone before they get inside to really dive a little bit deeper. I would love to read people's minds, but unfortunately that is not possible yet. So I think that is really the challenge, that you're going to let people in still who are, there is no solution to that. Yeah, you're going to let people inside who will not treat the space with the respect, and the people inside with the respect it needs. But it is such an important part of creating safer spaces. Like, I have been to spaces with no door policy, and it just feels completely different inside. I do not feel safe, and that is partly due to the door policy already. So it is very important that you have the right people at the door who know the party throughout, who know the community throughout, who have been on the dance floor themselves, and who are also very strong at the door. Like, I was not strong enough. Like, people could have a really sad story, and I would still be like, okay, well, you flew all the way from Singapore so you can get in, and it's not the way to do it. So it is about having the right people in the right spot also at the party, which is not me.
But it sets the tone. It's the most important part. It's the beginning of the party, and the filtering you do there.
And one thing I want to add, like, it should also be a welcoming and nice experience. There is a lot of very kind of intrusive and aggressive door policies that make you not feel welcome from the start. And I think it's so important that when you arrive at a party, you feel immediately welcome, because that is the first interaction that guests are going to have with your event. And if that is one where they feel immediately like attacked and questioned, that is not the way to start your event. So yeah, we should also be a little bit nicer at the door.
Yeah. And how about you, Nadine? What is your biggest challenge?
Some similar things that was said from the rest of the panel members. Like, we don't police on the door either. Like, it's just, you can't do that. You can't judge someone based on like how they look and how they're going to act in the space. But I guess like the two biggest challenges that I would say they had is just using the word safe at all. We used the word safe space in year one. We've been running for like 6 years now. And then after that, we started using safer. But even at that, like, even alluding to any sort of like safety, I think is irresponsible. So we use the word like intentional, because like it's different for me. Like I said before, like I grew up in the clubs and stuff. Like, so I know what a club looks like. Like, a lot of people that are coming, especially now with like 2 years of like not being able to club, and these 18-year-olds who didn't understand their sexual identity yet and now are ready to go clubbing, or 16-year-olds that are now turned 18, like they have not any experience of what clubbing before like used to be like, or just like a club in general. It is loud, people bump into each other, it's drunk, like the people are drunk or taking drugs, like none of that is like, never mind like abusers or people that are there to disrupt the space. Like, just on a base level, like a club for someone who's not used to a club experience is very, very intense. Like, so like we don't use the word safe like at all, even like safer, like just to eradicate that like completely, I think really like helped us, and to take like putting it back onto I guess like the community of it being like more secular. Like again, it's about like messaging. So it's like, hey, this is, and keeping that messaging as much as possible. This is who the space is for. Like, this is why you should come. Question the reasons why you're coming. And then still, people who are like everyone else said before, who are experiencing doing the door, who've been inside the club, who understand what's going on, who can just naturally smell when appropriate questions are needed to ask. But I guess like the other one, I guess the biggest challenge though is that it's not always outsiders. Actually, the biggest problems that come with going against like our policy and sexual assault, harassment, and predatory behaviour or discriminatory behaviour comes from inside our own community. Like we are not separate from the outside world. Like, so how do we support our community who don't have many places to go but still can be perpetrators of harm? Like, so I guess from that it's about learning about like abolition and community accountability, social justice, like on a much deeper level. So because we don't believe that we should kill all abusers or that they are like inherently like bad people. We believe that they need support like too, as much as like the victim does. So what does that look like long term? Especially because if we, for example, if we were to kick, Pussy Palace is for a group of people that are already excluded from the rest of society. So if we begin to act like police and then keep excluding people within that don't have many places to go, what does that say? Then they become abandoned and have no place to go. So it's very, very difficult long-term work, which, like Casper said, you will make mistakes, but we get help from like groups like abolition groups like Credo and Good Night Out, and look to a lot of places like this, because when we're talking about our communities, this is like a long-term problem. But yeah, the biggest one that helped us, what I say is just eradicating the word safe completely and using the word intentional and setting what our intentions were. And then another one is like dealing within the problems of harm and harm doing within our own community.
Yeah, and thanks. And also, I want to, because I heard you say the word safe space is just not something you like to use.
It doesn't exist. Like, it's
Yeah.
irresponsible.
And I think
Individual, like someone can go to our party or any of our events, festivals, and say, hey, that was a really safe experience for me, and that's an individual thing. But to say it as like a group, that is irresponsible, and ultimately, like, you cannot like measure safety, because one other person's safe is another person's like unsafe, depending on what they experience. So yeah, I think if it just eradicates it completely, then it takes away the responsibility of the facilitator as well, because it's about the customer, the guest of the space, to as well as the facilitator, to understand like what their role in it is, of like how much safety do they need. Oh, it's not going to be safe to me because it's not got disabled access. It's not going to be safe for me because it's not got a door policy. Like it's about having a secular moment between you and your customer, and what you can realistically provide, and what your boundaries are, and what is realistically going to feel good from them. But even in that formula, anything can happen, you know?
Yeah, and I think it's important to really make a distinction between safe spaces and safer spaces, because like you said, you don't want to take away the responsibility, like the individual responsibility people have to create a safe environment for themselves and others. And yeah, I wanted to say, like, how do you feel about it? Do you think that the word safe space creates unrealistic expectations and
Of
kind
course.
yeah, right?
Your audience is the judge of that.
Yeah.
Judge.
And also, you don't want to be in a position where if something does happen, people are like, I thought this was a safe space,
course not.
you know, even though you're still dealing with individuals. And yeah,
You cannot guarantee anything like safer or safe spaces. You can only guarantee that you're trying your best. You're, doing everything you can. And I think that's why intention and transparency are like key things. And yeah, keep trying to like incorporate feedback and trying to make it better. And I mean, I was listening to what Nadine was saying about intentional spaces, and I really like that. I'm gonna remember that, and I'm gonna
Copy that.
yeah, no, not
Yeah.
copy. Yeah,
Oh, you
I
can copy the best things.
research
she's
it.
going to steal it, is what she's saying. No.
I'm gonna steal it.
It's inspiring.
Fine to copy, there's plenty of other places to go. so very queer-rooted word in a lot of spaces. So please, I encourage people to use it. Set your intentions and be transparent with your audience about what your intentions are. And I think that will be better for both you and your audience. And yeah, it's a long time word that's used in a lot of spaces. So yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Yeah, the intention is already a beautiful thing when you think about it, because I don't know, clubbing 20 years ago was a whole different experience. You kind of had to, I don't know how about you, but for me it kind of felt like I had to just accept a certain level of unsafety, you know? Like you went out and there was going to be a chance that someone was going to slap your ass, and that was just part of your reality. And it's really crazy to think about, right? That was just part of our experience, that was, it just came with the territory. You want to go out, someone is probably going to touch you at some point. Congratulations, like kind of that. And I love seeing that now people are more intentional about it, because it doesn't have to be that way. And I think that changing the whole idea of safer into intentional would change a lot, you know, because it's not going to be perfect, but the fact that there are so many beautiful organizations and clubs that are trying is already making a huge difference. And, you know, like we're in a pandemic at the moment, obviously. I wonder what impact that had on the nightlife according to you, and what will happen, what you think will happen in the future. Is nightlife changed forever because of this? Magika?
I think I have a lot of hope that things will reopen. I think it's very necessary. I think it's very necessary for people who just became 18 years old and never been to a club, they've never been to a festival. And I think which way or the other, we will reopen. I mean, after Saturday, things are happening again. That.
Stay hopeful.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And still create. During pandemic, I created, I think, 3, for sure 2, but maybe 3 beautiful concepts, because I just try to do only happy thoughts.
Yeah. I understand. And how about you?
Yeah, I'm sure everything will open again. I'm just really curious to see how that will go, because we've already, I don't know if you guys know, but we've already opened for a week, and then the government shut down everything again. So yeah, it was crazy. I kind of avoided everything for that week.
Oh, what did you want to say, anything?
Oh, well, I was going to add on still from the last point still, just one other point, if that's okay. And that was just that also a lot of other places are using the word safe now without any like any club that you go to. It's like a buzzword, it's a trend word, like it's really baseless, and like because you will say this like little safe space like policy, but there isn't like any information for you to, okay, if something happens to me, like what do I do then? Like what does that mean that your space is safe? And there's no other reason to it. So I just kind of like, if like the straight like white guys are like using that word, then it's time for us to like to do something like different, because what they're doing and what we're doing to put us on the same bracket is just like not the same. So we have to move forward and like separate ourselves from them, because what they're not doing the same thing. They're not putting the same work into it, especially when there's just a bit of paper on a wall saying, hey, this is a safe space. But I'm like, okay, well, what happens to me if something happens? Yeah. And to answer the other question as well, is like that we've been open up since July. The UK government doesn't really care.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Jealous.
One hand, it's great because, like, we need to be inspired, we need to gather, we need to do all of that. But on the other hand, cases that are going up. So, we've just got like a really strict COVID rules like on the door. We didn't do a party until September, even though things opened up in July. We wanted to wait a little bit, and yeah, we're doing things at a lower capacity, making sure that we've got outside space. But of course, these are structural things that not every party can guarantee. But at least that we can do severe COVID checks, which is proving that you've got you've just done a test in the last 24 hours, and you can prove it by taking a selfie with the codes before and after, so that no one's bringing just any old codes. Yeah, but it's still then it's I'm always in two minds, because I'm this is great, but also it's scary, so
And what about you, Casper?
Yeah, so I think for us, COVID really was a unique opportunity also for reflection as a collective, almost maybe a little bit like a reset button, which we're kind of like now in the midst in. We also really went back to our roots as an art collective, which is really how we started off. And also now, as Conception, we have the time to reconsider things of like, what did we do wrong and like ways to do better. So I think this is a big chance for us as well to improve as a collective and as the human beings that are involved. With our first events are happening, was actually last week. And then secondly to that, which is something I don't know yet how it is going to evolve, but being a sex positive party where touch is such a big element of it, I'm really curious as well how this is going to develop over the coming months when our spaces are opening again. What way is it going? Are we actually becoming a little bit afraid of touching people that we don't know yet? Or is it actually the opposite because we have been staying away for it so long that now kind of like it's going to be this explosion of like exploration, experimentation, and exploring boundaries together. And I think it is, in that sense, could be quite an exciting time. From some research that we have done in the middle of the pandemic, we actually found out that a lot of people have been exploring their sexualities during the pandemic because there was suddenly so much. The only thing we were left with was our fantasies. So our fantasies went to places that they've never been before. And if these fantasies are becoming realities now in the real life, I think we could see, as a collective, quite some exciting things happening from that. But I think time will tell from that perspective.
Yeah. And one thing I do hear is that a new initiative or new initiatives have come out of this. So that is nice. You were working on 2 different projects, you say, or 2 for sure.
Yep.
And that's a plus, and I guess for you too, obviously. You had tell something about the initiative that started because of the pandemic.
Yeah, so after a few months of the first wave, we kind of wanted to connect with our community and our audience, and we didn't want to do it online because it felt like everything was digitalized, and that was really okay, but we didn't want to do another like live event thing or anything digital, basically. So we decided we'd never done it before, but we thought we could do it. So we tried, and now we have the Cloud magazine.
Yeah.
So now we have the. Thanks. So basically, with Cloud, what we always try to do is give platform to new young queer or BPOC creatives, and with either performances or exhibitions, they're always a part of Cloud in some way. And we decided that a magazine would be like a new, cool offline platform, and also something that was really lacking in media, I find, in the Netherlands, is that the stories that are always told about us is very tragic or is always misrepresented, in my opinion. And I just wanted to see us like on a glossy magazine and like take up that space in that world where things were moving very slow.
Spreading a little queer joy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was wondering, what was the most inclusive club experience you had yourself, and why? And was it at your own party or was it somewhere else?
I'm sad to say it was at my own party. But yeah, I mean, we've always looked up to like other parties, but it's always in somewhere else. You know, it's never in another. There's not a lot here, basically. Well, there is a lot, but I think our own parties have always been the nicest. It kind of ruined everything else for me.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, and is the same true for you, that the most inclusive club experience is the experience you
I
had?
think actually that was at Conceptual in Berlin, because this was, I'm not really a very big sex party goer, but I needed to check out Conceptual for Milkshake. And what I thought was cool that straight and queer was walking through each other. So before people are trying to seduce you or something, they just ask.
Yeah, consent is a big one.
And which I thought was so cute and so polite. So that, I find that very inclusive.
Yeah. And for you, your most inclusive club experience?
Yeah, definitely Pussy Palace, but also like I've been lucky enough to being able to travel and got to visit like a lot of other club spaces like worldwide and people like um, in New York such as like Pappy Juice and also like in Miami, Mississippi and there's a few other London parties like Misery, which is a sober queer club night, which is amazing. Yeah, so but still, like nothing feels safer than at home, you know.
Yeah. And Casper?
Yeah, for me, I think it's actually a recent one that I would say I would highlight. And I don't know if it was for me the most inclusive one ever, but it was, in some ways, it felt very, very inclusive in a sense. It was in Kiev, where we hosted a party with the collective there in a club called K41 about a month ago. And why it was such an inclusive experience for me is, I mean, Ukraine is not the country in Kiev, the city that we consider as very inclusive spaces to us as queer people. But what this club managed to create behind those four walls was just very special. And I think that was partly because there are just not many spaces in the city. There might only, maybe that is the only space where you can actually go to with all your friends and it's a big party. And because it is one of the few spaces, it also felt super diverse and inclusive. It was a mix of people and everyone was just really respectful of each other because there were no other spaces to go. So this is kind of the space that you have to do it with. And I think that was just really, really beautiful to see. And I think we're gonna see lots more coming from that club in the next coming of years. And I think it is also really beautiful and important to see that there is a younger community within countries like Ukraine that is just really kind of like standing up to all the oppression that the city is facing. And that's not just from the queer community, but also the allies within that city that are living within there. And that's just, I think, very powerful to kind of like see on a dance floor. So I think that was, yeah, one of my favorite experiences in a very, very long time.
Oh, nice. And this brings me to my next question, because we want to have more of these experiences everywhere. So we want to, like engage people who might want to own a club sometime to also make their club as safe as possible. What would you say is the most important thing? Like if you had to give them advice, what would you tell them they really need to pay attention to if they want to create a intentional space? Let's just say an intentional space.
I think it doesn't just start at like the party, but like Casper was saying, it starts with the branding. It starts with the tickets. Are the ticket prices accessible? Is the branding, for example, with our branding, we always try to not incorporate like skin colors or genders, or everything is like you're free to see it as however you want to see it. And I think that makes it the full experience, that it's not just, or for example, we have a preparation station, so people, if they're not comfortable walking outside down the street to the party, they can change upstairs. It's the small things like that that make it inclusive and accessible and really sets the tone.
So the advice would be like expand your vision and make it bigger than just the club, but also like the way you communicate to people and the opportunities you give your guests in the way of a preparation station.
Yeah.
Interesting. And yeah, what would you advise people to do?
Oh, I agree, exactly. I also think that you need to drop your own ego as organizer and think that you want to give others the best time of their lives. As long as you act like that, then if that's your intention, then you're more humble to create a platform for others, for other artists, and of course for your audience.
Yeah, but in what ways do you think ego of the organizer gets in the way of creating an experience?
Well, that's what I mentioned before. It's the tone of voice. It's how you invite people. What do you do for others? Every year we invite almost 1,000 people who cannot afford a ticket At the same time, people have a gas ticket via partners or friends. They need to donate money, and this is why we create mini Milkshake for people with a disability. But if you are transparent to your visitors and to your followers, what are you doing with that money and how? Not just to give yourself a thing on the chest or something, but just to be transparent why. Then there's more trust and there's more positive things, I think, from both sides. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, so like more reciprocities. They know that your intentions are good, so they kind of want to help you as well.
Yeah.
They feel,
I mean, for a mini Milkshake, which we do that already for 5 years, 5-6 years, the Friday before Milkshake Festival, and there are 1,000 people with a disability coming. You don't want to know. I think we have more than 1,000 volunteers wanting to work over there. DJs, the biggest DJs name, they want to volunteer because I thought if you're as popular as you are, you need to, you can make this addictive. You know that's to create good vibes. Some people in the community want the rest of the world to accept them, but what do you do for others who are more vulnerable? So I think this is a beautiful. I love that storyline.
Yeah, it kind of brings me to my next question because how do you make an event truly inclusive? So how do you make sure that you really prioritize those marginalized, even within your own marginalized community? Because even within the queer community, there are so many different levels of people who are more marginalized than others. So how do you make sure that that you save space for them, you don't forget them? Maybe in your door policy, or like maybe even making sure that you're wheelchair accessible.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Wheelchair accessible is very important. This year, but of course it didn't happen. I was working on this very big non-alcoholic bar because the people from Trans Scream told me, no, we don't want any alcoholic sponsorships because trans community is really dealing with alcohol. So I thought, oh my shit, what am I doing, you know? So let's create and make that more attractive, that you don't need to drink that beer because the soft drinks are boring, you know? So I was working on this whole mocktail bar. But you live and you learn on the way, I think, and by these kind of panels and talking with each other.
Yeah, and also like recognizing that everyone faces the same challenges, but you know that it's totally it's just part of the course. And before I move on, I want to say we have some space for audience questions. So if you have a question, raise your hand, and my little assistant will walk up to you. Any questions? Don't be shy.
Shy people.
Hi.
Hi, hello. So I thought I would just get the ball going to talk about something that I've been really reflecting also as a queer organizer, which is what happens when someone breaks the rules? What happens when someone breaks someone's consent in our space? Of course, we want to apply transformative justice to these situations, and I think it was Nadine who said, you can't just expect someone to disappear from the community and end up alone and isolated. So how do you, in your experience, I think this is for all of you, deal with this, the taking accountability for stuff that happens in your space, but also the rehabilitation of this person? It's something that's been on my mind, and yeah, wonder what your thoughts are about it.
Yes, thanks. So how do you make sure that how do you take care of someone breaking a rule in your space? And this is for everyone. Yes, Nadine?
Yeah, so like it really is case by case. You know? It depends. Like, okay, so what we do is we have like levels, right? So level 1 is something that can be handled with someone and the person can still stay in the space. For example, right? Yeah, everybody understands that you can't consent, that you can't touch someone without their consent. But really when we think about that, especially as survivors, we tend to only think about like, you know, grievous forms of sexual assault. We also don't think about, you know, ways that we still, like, maybe don't, aren't being consensual. For example, like, a couple of years ago, someone was saying goodbye to me at a party, and I didn't really want to hug them, but they did, and I didn't know how to communicate in the moment to hug them. So I sort of like took their hand and kissed them on the hand to like, so because I didn't want to come close, but that was like a way of saying goodbye. And then their face kind of went weird, and I was like, oh my god, like I just kissed someone on the hand without consent. And then we had a conversation about it. It was like fine, like, but it's just like moments like that. Or for example, sometimes when like people are dancing in the dance floor and they're shaking their ass, it's a really like common thing to go up and like pat them on the ass to be celebratory in that moment, but that's still touching someone without their consent. And also like hugging, maybe someone's crying or they're upset, they lost their phone or can't find their friend, and the most natural thing to do is to hug them, to console them, but like that's also really not good for that person in the moment. So it depends on the situation, right? So like level 1 is for something that we can handle, like for example, someone touched someone while they were dancing, and then you remind them like, hey, remember, you can't touch someone without their consent, and they go, yeah, okay, I'm really sorry, and that person's like, it's okay, blah 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 blah, and it's fine, you know, and it's something to remember for the future. And then we go up to like a level 2 situation where it's like a harassment, right? And someone is being harassed in the space, and then it's really up to the victim to decide what they want to do. Really, do they want that person ejected, or do they want that person, are they happy with that person's apology? Now, that really depends. We have a thing called PP support, formerly called Badge Bitches, and PP support have been trained by like Goodnight Out on how to like handle these situations. So it really depends on how it can escalate to a level 3, which means ejection, depending on how that person's going to act. Like, is that person being in denial, being like, oh, you know, like, making a fuss about it, like, then, you know, that person is not safe, and if they've done it to that person, then they're probably going to do it to other people, so they have to like leave, right? But what happens if that person is also a member of community, right? So there's multiple things we can do. So one of the things that we can do is we can get the help, because also we have to remember that we are not, if you and your facilitators are not trained in this, like, it's really irresponsible then to take on the role of an accountability justice person if you're not trained or have the experience in that. So I would always say, like, go, if you feel like it's something that you want to help this person, go to an outside group. I'm sure like in your city or outside of your city, there is tools and groups that can like help facilitate in this. But something that we do is that we ask them who their friends are. For example, it actually happened to me in my own club space where someone sexually assaulted me in Pussy Palace. And I knew some of their friends, so and they were in denial about it, so I went and spoke to their friends outside, and I said, okay, you can come back to the club now that you know your friends understand what's happening, they know that this is actually a pattern of behaviour. You go and you do the research, you do the work, you take some time off. I didn't say, you know, you can come back to Pussy Palace in 4 times. Like, you decide, you and your friends, it's called like a pod, like you have, like each person, like the victim and the harm doer will have a pod of people around them, making sure that they're being accountable and supported for whatever is happening, right? And so you make sure that the harm doer has a pod of people, and that pod then decide with the harm doer when is appropriate time for them to come back if they have been accountable to the victim, right? And that's not something that you always need to be a part of. Maybe you get help from an outside group, or maybe if you and your team have done the training and have capacity to do something like that, then you can, you know? So that's kind of just a rough idea of like how it goes at Pussy Palace. But again, it really, really is case by case. Like, because then, you know, we tend to say we don't ban people, but we don't say that outside. But you know, if it comes to the point where it's a serial abuser, like, we need to understand that like a lot of people who are serial abusers, they are, you know, also like victims of abuse, and they need like long-term care that only they themselves and their support group can go and help for them. We don't have the capacity to facilitate that. Unfortunately, it's something that I look towards the future, that we could be, that we could have within enough training and enough group and enough funding that we could have an accountability section as part of us. But that is like something that's like way in the future. So because these people really need like long-term care, and it's something that they have to like want to do, like, and you can only really be accountable for something once you're functional. So if this person doesn't have housing, if this person is taking drugs frequently, if they're like depressed, how can they be accountable for something when they're not in a place of functionality? It's like it's not feasible. But in that case, that person is too unsafe to be at our events, and then we have to set a boundary there. Unfortunately, it breaks my heart, but it's not happened yet, right? I can't say, but it's not to say that can't happen in the future and will happen. Yeah, I mean, I will say that we used to be very irresponsible before, but mine is like 3 years ago. If someone said this person's an abuser, I would be like, right, out, without much thought of thinking about it. I was very much in a binary thought of like, oh, if you're an abuser, that you are bad and you must be ejected and I need to protect my community. Without nuance, without context, without understanding, and have learned like a lot in this period of time. And it's much more complex than that. And I also like have to look at myself as well, like look inwardly. We are all harm doers in one way or another. So would I, if a Pussy Palace was 10 years ago, I probably would have got banned, realistically. Like, I was a horrible drug addict that was very, very messy, So, yeah, like that's a rough idea of what we can do. Because that's, again, it's very, very much my case.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's an important point you're making, because it becomes really hard to do that when you have a bigger crowd, like because you could never do that at a festival, like
No.
the case-by-case thing. So I feel like if you want to keep an eye on that and really have the luxury to look at a case-by-case situation, you'd have to keep your parties fairly small, correct?
I don't think so. We 1,000 people came to Pussy Palace last time. Like, I think if you have the team trained specifically in that, so example for if it's to be in a festival situation, so we come into festivals and we have this thing called the sanctuary, which is which we also do in the club. So it's like you have your club space, high energy, rave, and then we also do the sanctuary, which is like a sober, chill space where you can charge your phone, fix your makeup, relax. There's always a massage there, or like some other sort of vendors, tarot cards, something like this there. So we also do this in festival spaces. We did it at Lovebox for 3 years in a row, and we were supposed to do festivals in 2020, but obviously that all cancelled, and then we're going to set up to do it next time. So what we do, so in every festival there's like a welfare tent usually, so if you need first aid, if you need to report abuse, but these places are usually like quite clinical. So what we do is at the sanctuary is we provide like another like form of I guess like to help in that like case by case like scenario, because if you have the training and you can do that, I think, regardless of how big the space is. There are going to be some times where it's going to be a straight ejection, and it also depends on the community of the festival. Like, I think when it comes to a lot of the festivals at the sanctuary end tend to be like straight spaces, so then we have like a zero tolerance to harassment. So because sexual assault and sexual harassment is so commonplace, like you were saying earlier on, that it's just to be expected on a night out that you're going to get slapped your ass, because that stuff is not reprimanded. So for stuff like that, we have like a zero tolerance harassment, so if you do that, you are out and that's it. And if you reprimand that enough, then people will start to cotton on that it's something that you can't do, because it has consequences to those actions. But when we're talking about like a queer black and brown space where these communities are already excluded from society, then I have more time and then I have more care to do like a case-by-case scenario. So it really depends on the event, but I do believe you can apply abolition ideas and community justice and transformational justice to any space with the right facilities. And also, I would just want to preface this by saying that this is not also something that we need to take on. It is a lot of work, and there are communities out there that help facilitate with this, like spaces like Cradle and Good Night Out, which I really all recommend that you check out. But I'm sure in every city there'll be some group that is already trying to do this work. Yeah.
Yep. Thanks. Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah. And does anyone want to add to that? Like how? Because
No.
with you, I honestly don't know. I don't think it's even a thing you have the luxury to think about. If someone breaks the rule, they're out at a festival.
Of course, we throw people out at Milkshake.
Yeah.
But most of the time, it's a group who just happen to be there. But of course, you cannot control everything.
No.
Yeah, and I relate to what Nadine was saying because I'm also, we're very new at this. So it was all kind of trial and error. And I think there are indeed levels to things, and some things are meant well, and we can say, please don't do that, or something like that. But there have been cases where we really had to throw someone out because they were not even up for a discussion. They didn't even want to talk about it, and that's just a clear no. That's a risk. And but it's something that you kind of that I personally have been learning as we've been doing this. And that's coming from someone that really enjoys kicking people out. But yeah, so it's not all just black and white. It's really, that's why also what Casper was saying about, the door shifts, if a volunteer is not up for those things, it's all up to them and whatever you're comfortable with. And whenever something like this happens, we also should not forget to ask the victim, indeed, what can we do for you? Are you okay? We tend to run off real quick and look for that person and get an action, but we must not forget the victim that also needs
Your help.
Yeah, care and attention. And
Definitely.
And if I could add something really short to this as well, and I think it also comes back to what Nadine mentioned at the very start of the panel about the dance floors also being such education, having an educational purpose. If we kick people out immediately, even for the tiniest things, right, we lose that opportunity to educate them. And I've seen it myself firsthand. Sometimes it's not always bad intentions, it's just a lack of education and not knowing yet how to act in a certain situation if it's maybe your first time in an event. So I definitely believe it's a case by case and there's different levels. But there is such a room for education as well in case people do something that is not appropriate in the spaces that we create. Yes. And that is how we grow also as a community and beyond.
Yeah. I want to say thank you. And now I would like to thank all the wonderful speakers for coming, and hopefully we can meet on a dance floor soon and educate each other. And I want to thank you all for doing all the work in creating these safe spaces, because if there's one thing we can take from this, is that it ain't easy. It takes a lot. It takes a lot of heart and effort and attention. And yeah, I appreciate that. And I think everyone here appreciates that. So thanks for coming, and a special thanks to Nadine and Casper for tuning in from London and Germany, I guess, right? Berlin. And I had to think. Sorry, this is my third panel, okay? Give me a break. And last but not least, I want to thank the wonderful audience for coming, and for everyone at home for tuning in. And I recommend you check the Deep in Vogue exhibition when you're here, because it's a really cool one about ballroom and ballroom culture. So check it out. The exhibition is open until 10. So yeah, I've said all the things I needed to say. Thanks for coming. Give the speakers an applause.